Okay.
Hello, sir. Oh, where is my video? There we go.
Francisco.
How are you, my man? Let me get this fucking lamp out of the way. There you go. Right. Let me get this thing.
Take your time, man.
All right. Let me see.
You look very handsome today, Francisco.
I always look like this, Doug. I'm not. That doesn't mean handsome. I just mean this is my face.
Hold on a second. I'm just setting things up over here, making sure we can see each other, okay?
Hi, Francisco. How are you?
Hello, Simon. How are you?
I'm very well. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Let me see if I've got phone is off.
Doug speaks very highly of you.
I keep finding that he he recommends me to people and never tells me about it. So I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Well, he needs to be recommending you to women. You know, that's the main thing.
I have all the trouble with women I can handle between my wife, my 2 daughters, and my cat.
Oh, okay. How old are your daughters?
They are 4 and 1.
Oh, that's nothing. I have a 17-year-old daughter. Just wait.
Well, I mean, well, you know what they say, that expectation is usually worse than reality. So I have, 13 years to worry about what's going to happen, and when the oldest gets to there, you're almost out of it.
No, you're never out of it with daughters. Doug, have you got a daughter?
Yeah, my daughter is about 9, so she tells me what to do. That's all she does. She tells me what to do all that. And I
tell
try
you
to
what-
fight back, and she puts the biggest temper tantrum you've ever seen in your life. And then I realize that's just every woman I've ever met in my life. So it's just better to contain.
Very good. Well, I mean, you never stop being told what to do. Trust me.
Yeah.
That's
I remember when my kid was 2 and a bit, she had just learned how to speak, and I was trying to hurry her in the shower because she needed, it's bedtime. And I said, listen, you need to finish your shower. It's time to go to bed. And she just looked at me and said, tough luck. That's when I realized that maybe I should watch what I say near the kids.
Yeah, real quick, I invited Francisco onto the show because, first of all, we can hardly call this a show, right, Simon? But
Yeah.
there's talk.
Yeah, it's not a
And,
show.
Yeah.
Show is a loaded word.
Yeah, show means you've got people that know what they're doing,
Right.
and that's definitely not Doug and I.
We have no idea what we're doing. We're happy to admit that. But I want to bring up that Francisco was one of my favorite people on LinkedIn. And I say that without kissing his butt. This is seriously one of the most fun, interesting gentlemen I've ever seen on LinkedIn. And I happily recommend people to his book. More than one, Francisco. It's been 5 or 6, maybe 7. So people always ask me, is your book to read on how to write better content? I'm like, yeah, read Francisco's book. And they're like, oh, okay. Because typically, most people like me will say, read this copywriter or watch this YouTube of this copywriter. I'm like, no, you need to learn the art of storytelling and connecting with your reader first before you worry about copywriting formulas and so on. Simon, have you ever seen any of Francisco's posts before?
Not until you told me about him. Not because it doesn't show up in my feed until you started telling me about him. And I think LinkedIn is full of these hidden gems that you don't come across until you actually meet interesting people. And that's the best part of LinkedIn. I think the most interesting people I have met have been because of the starting to engage with comments with people that I quite like. And then that leads to one introduction to another. And I think one of the most interesting people I've met, Francisco, is a what they call an interventionist. And so she counsels people on drugs and alcohol, and she travels the country here in the US, in crisis management. And she's a certified nurse, and we've become best friends, and the reason we became friends is because I insulted her on a post, and we had an argument on LinkedIn for about 3 days, which is quite common with me and females on LinkedIn. You know, normally I'm getting abused by multiple at once. So now I temper myself in terms of, you know, how I act. But she and I have become great friends, and I think that's the power of LinkedIn.
Yeah, one of the things that I tend to think of as the best part of LinkedIn is something that just happened, you know, today, right at the beginning of our conversation, which is Doug has spent the best part of 2 or 3 minutes telling me how brilliant I am. Now, I don't know you, but I don't get that from my wife. I don't get that from my friends. I maybe occasionally get that from my daughter, but it depends on her moods. So LinkedIn is one of the only places where people seem to genuinely appreciate you and not try to rip the piss out of you every chance they get.
That's true.
Which is, you know, makes for a nice change sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that I have been on LinkedIn a long time, and I never engaged with it until a year ago. I mean, Doug's heard this story, you know, time and time again, but it was really until, you know, the start of the pandemic that I decided to get serious about it. And that's how we met. I mean, I just started commenting on Doug's stuff, and I have a passion for good copy and copywriting. And my very first job out of school was with a big ad agency. And so I was very fortunate, because I think a lot of people, their first jobs are shitty experiences. You know, but I look back on my first job, you know, I loved it. I can still remember it vividly. And, you know, I think that's the whole mood of LinkedIn, the whole sense of community has changed. It was never like this. It was never a place where you could collaborate, where you could build a tribe, you know. And I said the only thing that sort of has this disconnect in my brain is that it's now owned by Microsoft, and I just don't know how tribal Microsoft is. So, but the good thing is that they're leaving it alone, which is good, I think. Right.
Yeah, this is one thing about LinkedIn that a lot of people are still very surprised about. I was just with some friends over the weekend, with the limited number of friends we're allowed at the moment, and one of them saw I showed her something on LinkedIn, and she said, "Oh, this looks a bit like Facebook." And I said, "But what did you think it would look like?" And she said, "I don't know. I just a whole bunch of CVs." Yeah. And I said, well, it hasn't been that for a very long time. Right. But what I found and still find really interesting about LinkedIn, apart from the community aspect of it, is that it's become this platform where whatever type of content you want to produce seems to find an audience. So, you know, most of my stuff has typically been, you know, telling stories or doing videos with stories or how to tell stories. But you know, someone who I know very well, and it is a friend, is Alex B. Sheridan, and he started doing all these green screen videos with like comedy sketches last year, and now plenty of people do that type of stuff, and you just never think that this is the type of content anyone would produce for a business platform, and yet you can definitely find an audience with whatever type of content you want to produce, and for a lot of people, you don't, you know, where else are you going to do that? Yeah. Where are you going to put those skills to use?
And I think the commercial return on LinkedIn is, I think, potentially higher for most people. I think to monetize Facebook, to monetize TikTok, YouTube, those Instagram, Pinterest. Now, sure, there's always going to be the outlier of people that do really well on those, you know, platforms. But in general, I think LinkedIn gives you not a level playing ground, but a playing ground that you can really shine. And if you need to monetize that or want to monetize that, I think that I don't think you can find a better platform or a better outlet or portal for people like us in the business environment. I think. I mean, I didn't originally go on LinkedIn to find a job because I'm unemployable, and I didn't go on LinkedIn to sort of generate revenue or push our transportation business. I really wanted to just understand the community aspect of it and build a, build a tribe, if you like, or be a part of a tribe, not perhaps build one. I think, be a part of a tribe and just see where the water, leveled out for us. And, hence here we are today. And we've had some amazing conversations, and I think I've built a really good network, one that I'm certainly proud of. And I think I've got resource that I can tap quickly if I need it. And that to me is the best outcome for me.
Yeah, there's sorry, Doug, go on.
Oh, sorry, man. Just real quick, I totally agree with that because I've got my first start on Twitter, and Twitter 8 years ago was a writer's paradise. I mean, we were just playing with words as short as we could make it, but it always lacked that sort of transparency that LinkedIn gives. LinkedIn is one of the most transparent platforms you can ever get on because one, it's very hard to duplicate another account. You can't be anonymous. Everything's out there. You've got your reference set, and people can contact those people in the DM. You've got your companies that you've worked for in the past. You can't do that anywhere else or any other platform that I can think of where people can get trust. It's very hard to burn somebody on LinkedIn because your whole profile is one big social proof and actual proof of your work and people you can contact to say, it's not really that good. And they could say, yeah, he's good. Oh, no, he's horrible. And, you can't do that on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. So the level of transparency and trust is really high on LinkedIn. So I love this place. So anyway, Francisco, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that I find very attractive about LinkedIn is that in some way, and this is sort of a lead into a lot of the stuff that I normally talk about, which is storytelling and telling stories, is that the way most people used to interact with LinkedIn, and a lot of people still do, is very similar to the way a lot of people communicate in their normal business life. So if you look at a company account, it's the most boring thing in the world. So it's just, they just put out this company statements in this boring, sterile language. No one cares. No one engages with it. And I think a lot of people, and this was me until a few years ago, I almost never posted anything. And if I posted something, was this like an article with no personality at all. And doing what I do, I find that that's how a lot of people are in the workplace. And then the challenge is, both on LinkedIn and in the real world, is, well, actually, if you just communicate with more personality, if you tell stories, if you do whatever your creativity or your personality dictate you do, you will attract people to you. And in LinkedIn's particular case, you attract business to you. So it is interesting where you still see a lot of people stuck in this old way of communicating and getting little or no traction, even though you go look at their profile and says, hold on, this guy has 25,000 followers. How come they get 4 likes in a post?
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, but I think that's where there's so much potential in corporate, because everyone's, now I come from corporate, and Doug, we chat about this a lot, but if you look at all of the corporate profiles and people that work for corporate that are still hiding behind the corporate branding statement and guidelines, and they post just boring stuff. But you think, how much potential still is there out there if those people just got the true essence of LinkedIn? And as like, what you're most perhaps well known for, Francisco, is about telling stories. So I'd love to hear more about that, your story. How did you get here?
So, when I was a kid, I don't know if this is obvious now. Perhaps little Wolverine over there is giving it away, but when I was a kid, I was a massive nerd. So
I really like
nerd.
Oh, okay.
Geek. So I really loved superheroes. I read tons of comic books. I read stuff like Lord of the Rings. I was the worst kind of nerd. I even played Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, that's as much of a nerd as you get. And so as I grew up, I wanted some of that adventure and excitement in my life. So it was perhaps a bit of a surprise that I ended up becoming a financial advisor. And don't get me wrong, it it was a very good job, but helping rich people make more money and looking at spreadsheets all day isn't really anyone's idea of an excitement life. But the truth is, the job was good. I made very good money doing it, and that wasn't the only part of my life that was going well. I mean, I had after many years apart, I had gotten back together and married my high school sweetheart. We moved to Barcelona, which is an incredible city, and we just had our first daughter. So everything was going very well. But the truth is, I was pretty bored. It's you go to work, you spend 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours every single day doing something that doesn't really excite you a great deal, and that slowly but surely starts taking its toll. And the only time I felt that excitement was when I was on stage sharing my stories, because I had gotten into public speaking, and Peter, my friend who gotten me into it, said to me once, said, "Listen, you're pretty good at the speaking thing. Are you sure you don't want to consider doing this professionally?" And I'm like, "Nah, the job is good, the money is good. I don't want to rock that boat." And I didn't, and that years went by. And then the universe decided I needed to see some signs, and then in the same week, I got into a fight with my boss because I thought it was a great idea to tell him what I really thought of him. My cat fell ill and looked like she wasn't going to make it, and the landlord of the place that we loved living in told us he was going to sell the house and we needed to move out. So this happened in about a week. And if that wasn't enough, a few days later, my wife, Patricia, woke me up on the verge of tears and said the scariest words I had ever heard in my life: "Francisco, I'm pregnant again." So, we definitely weren't expecting a second kid, even though we are adults and already had one child. I clearly don't know how these things work yet.
No, obviously.
Yeah. But when we got over the shock of it, I just realized that I'm almost 40. I have a wife and about to have two kids, and I'm an adult now. And I looked at my job and I thought, is this my life now? Am I going to be a financial advisor doing this for the rest of my days? And that's when I started to panic. And my friend Peter came back to me and said, "Listen, I'm a bit bored of my corporate job. I think I'm going to give the speaking thing a go. Are you sure you don't want to consider it?" And I said, "You know what? Actually, I have to." And that's when I started moving towards this direction. And I wish the universe had given me those signs a bit earlier, because I started the speaker thing right before COVID hit, which is not, it wasn't perfect timing. But that's how I got into what I'm doing now. And storytelling was just sort of a natural choice of subject to focus on, because I've always loved stories and I've been telling stories for a long time. And it's one of those subjects that is sort of evergreen. It's I don't think that in my lifetime we're gonna get to a point where people are so good at it that no one needs to get better at it.
I have a quick question. So, a little parallel story to the story you just gave us.
Mm.
I've been following you for a while. You've lived in different countries. You're from Brazil, and I think you moved to England, and then you moved to Spain, right? Is that the correct order?
Yeah. So I left. I was so heartbroken about the first that girlfriend when she dumped me, that I thought I don't want to just some time apart. I need some continents apart. So I went to London originally, and I was there for 5 years. And then I left London and I had gotten back with the girlfriend, and she was living in Barcelona. So I came to Spain, I spent a year in Madrid, and then came to Barcelona and been here now for 11 years, 12 years. So, yeah.
Okay. And your ability to tell stories, and what I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, and you're not native language. I'm assuming you speak Portuguese. That's your dominant language. And I don't know, but you tell stories in English so wow that most native English speakers can't even do it. You know, and you're able to pick the words that are so perfect for the tone of the story. I was just wondering how you learned language so well, living in all of these different countries.
So I was actually born in the US. My father was taking a PhD in Philadelphia. So I was born there in Thomas Jefferson Hospital. And so for the first 2 years of my life, I listened to English every day. And I think that might have helped a little bit. But then when I went to Brazil, I think when I was 5 or 6, I started taking English as a second language. And because I was and am a nerd, I started reading these books that weren't translated. So you're trying to read the Dungeons and Dragons book, and it wasn't translated. So I would buy the book in English, and I would have a big dictionary, an English-Portuguese dictionary, and I would just read with one thing next to the other. And so I always studied English. Then I taught English for a while in Brazil, and then went to England, and essentially have never stopped speaking English every day since I'm maybe 17. And even today, I mean, most of the work I do is with people that are English speakers. So I actually find English to be a more natural language now than Portuguese, which is Latin languages are funny. They have too many conjugations for everything. They have genders for the words. So if you don't, it's difficult to speak correctly, Portuguese or Spanish, for example, and not sound very formal. So I actually speak English better than I speak Portuguese, I think. And also everything I read and all the TV I watch, it's all in English. So that helps.
And Francisco, what do you speak to your children in? What language?
English. So we made a choice because my wife speaks Portuguese to them. In Barcelona is a bit of a big crazy mix of languages. So in school they get Catalan and Spanish as the main languages. And I thought that if I didn't get the English early on, they would only start really getting English in school when they were, 5 or 6, and then they would either take longer to learn, or they would end up with a Spanish speaker's accent of English, which is not necessarily the greatest of accents. So I just decided I'm just going to speak to them in English all the time, and it's worked out so far. One of them doesn't speak yet, but the 4-year-old speaks better English than she speaks any other language at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, she's picking up Catalan very fast now that she's in school, but because she watches TV in English and has me speaking in English to her, she gets more English than she gets Portuguese. So Portuguese is not her strongest language, because she basically only listens to her mom talking in Portuguese.
So Francisco, the other question I have for you is, some people, will come on LinkedIn and they're intimidated. They look at it and say, well, I'm not a copywriter. I can't write. And I certainly don't know how to tell a story, because a lot of people think that their lives are boring, that what they've done in the past. And I'm sure if the three of us all had dinner and had a beer, we'd have some great stories to tell each other, or listening to each other's stories about how you started and how you ran away from all these women that broke your heart and then ran back to them. You and I could talk about, I don't run from any female, so I'm not doing that.
Actually, Doug has read my book, and he will know this because it's in the first page, I think, is that when I was younger, I was terrible at talking to women. Like, I could not pick up a girl to save my life. The only thing I was worse at than getting them was getting rid of them, which explains how I've only had 4 girlfriends and I married 2 of them.
Okay, so we might want to turn the camera off for the next bit, because I don't want to get, Doug knows. Doug was always hassling me about my, dating exploits. So, I mean, there's no problem in talking to girls now, especially with the internet, but getting them to leave is a big problem. So, but then, never mind. We don't want to get banned from LinkedIn by all the political correctness. So go back to the fact that, a lot of people are intimidated because they can't write, and then a lot of people are intimidated because they can't tell a story. So what's your advice to those people that say, well, Francisco, how do I tell us? I mean, my story's boring, or how do I tell a story? Like, why is that important?
The biggest mistake most people make is that they assume that a story is full of crazy adventures, and it's a big journey. You're facing unsurmountable obstacles. You're climbing Everest, or you've built a company from scratch and that company is worth millions. And that's, some great stories are like those, but most people's stories are not those and shouldn't be those, because a story is not really about the external circumstances. It's about the inside journey. So who were you in before, when the story started, and who are you at the end of it? Because if your story is that I've always been a great athlete and I trained for years to climb Everest, and I climbed Everest and it was great, it's a crap story. No one is interested in that story. Now, if you were a horrible, horrible athlete and you tried, training for a marathon and you didn't even succeed, you ran a third of the marathon, but it was the more than you'd ever run in your life, and you just feel so differently about yourself after running that third of a marathon, that can be a very good story, because so many people are gonna identify themselves with your starting point of I'm crap, I can't do this, and they will be inspired by where you got to at the end of the story. So once people realize that it's not about what happened, is how you felt about it and how it changed you, then anything becomes arguably anything can become an interesting story.
Right.
So when people say, well, I don't have any stories or whatever, I always ask, okay, have you ever made a mistake? Have you ever screwed up? Have you ever achieved anything? Have you ever failed at something? Have you ever learned anything? Because if you have, that means there's a story in there. And not every story is going to be interesting to every person, but if you just look for those types of experiences, there is a story in there. I mean, there's lots of easy tricks to think of the stories you have. One of the easiest ones these days is just look at your phone. Look at your pictures, and I'm sure you think of 10, 20 stories just by looking through the last year's worth of pictures. There's a friend of mine, John Zimmer, who says, you need to think of the 4 F's. So your firsts, your fears, your frustrations, and your what do you call your fiascos, or if you want to swear, your fuck ups. So everybody has those. There's another friend of mine called Mark Brown, and he says, firsts, lasts, worsts, and bests. So pick whatever word you want to use. Teacher. Who was your worst teacher? Who was your best teacher? Girlfriend. Who was your first girlfriend? Who was your last girlfriend? Job, boss, whatever. There's so many ways of thinking of those parts of your life, and if you do it this way, you go, oh yeah, I had this horrible teacher in school. What was so horrible about that person? Oh, he did this thing. Or, okay, can you tell me what the worst thing that teacher did was? There you go, story.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard once you know where to look.
Oh, I loved how simple you set that up to find stories and the everyday human experience that we all go through. And one of the challenges I had is when I work with executives to help them write their posts for LinkedIn or whatever medium they're using. They have a hard time with that, which is admitting a time when you had failure, admitting when something didn't work, admitting a weakness you think you have, admitting the work. They're so afraid to put that out there because they still want to project the image that, hey, I've got this big title, I've got to live up to my title. So my stories have to be about that title. And I'm like, no, it's about relating to your audience. Well, if I do that, then I'm not going to be able to get that job, or I'm not going to be able to get that prospect. They're going to view me as weak or full of flaw. I'm like, no, they're not. So how do you respond to people who give that counter argument back to you?
I think the first way I respond is say, get over yourself. But if I'm trying to be more tactical about it, this is a misunderstanding about what attracts anyone to you. People think that what attracts other people to them is how accomplished they are. It's not. It's not how competent you are, it's not how much success you had. Is is people realizing that at some point in your life you were where they are now and you've gotten to a better place. But if you only show them the better place, then they don't know if you were just very naturally talented. Maybe you never had to struggle with the things that they struggle with. And people say things like, oh, but I can't go on LinkedIn and tell a story, or I can't go on LinkedIn and make a video. And if all you do is show them the perfect video that you can make now or the great story you can tell, then it's hard for them to identify with that. But if you say, look at the stories I used to tell, how crap they were, or yeah, assuming this is what you're trying to teach people, if you look at the first video I ever put out on LinkedIn and they go, so you were crap like I am now and you know how to get better. Okay, well that's interesting. So you've traveled the path that I want to travel. And this is an interesting way to remember it. All great stories are a journey from pain to power. So in the beginning, there's a big problem and it's making you suffer. And at the end of that story, you now you know something you didn't, you can do something you couldn't do before, you have more power than you had before. So if all you're showing people is the power, they don't know that you felt their pain. So you need to share that so they realize that you know how to make the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think, go ahead.
Sorry, man. I have a quick question for you because it's making me think about sales, right? What Francisco is talking about for me works really well in marketing. We're into market yourself to make a personal brand. This is what we do. But I have a question for you. When you're running sales team and you're trying to connect with the person on the other end of the line, or you have to fly out to Indo-Pac, Southeast Asia to make a deal go through, where do stories fit in the sales process?
I mean, I think the story is everything. I think that when you're selling, you're telling a story from, about how your solution or your product, your service is going to solve a problem. How's it going to make their life better? I mean, sales it's all about storytelling, because you are solving a problem. You're either helping a person, helping a person run from pain, right? Or helping them fix a particular problem, or, taking them to a pleasure point in terms of, that's what I think sales is all about. If I look back on my sales career, of all the times I've been, let's call it successful, is that when I've connected with the client on a personal basis. And because great salespeople have great relationships with their prospects and their clients. They've developed that trust, they've developed a bond. And I don't care whether you're selling, a pen or you're selling, a multi-million-dollar software solution, that there's a very famous guy that works for Airbus that sells aircraft, but think of the job that person has. He or she is, and it's a he, but he's dealing with airlines that have got very complicated balance sheets and, and environments. And how does he cut through to beat the Boeing guy? There's only two choices. Now it's not just all about money. It's about the story that he's going to be able to tell to give the airline the confidence that product's going to be the right product for them taking for the next 25 years. And I think Francisco's right. I mean, it's, if anything that was dependent on your ability to tell a story, it's selling, I think. Okay. Listening and then telling the story. And I think that's certainly been key for me. I know with our transportation business, a lot of people could look at it and say, well, you're in a commodity business, you drive people from point A to point B. That's not 10% of what we do is that. 90% is everything else. the experience, the trust, the security, you know, that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, Simon, one of the things you mentioned that I think it's pretty clear to most people in theory, but they don't necessarily know how to apply this to sales, is that this old chestnut of people buy from people, right? But you know, often you don't have the chance to build a relationship. You're not meeting necessarily the clients for, you know, meeting after meeting after meeting, so they can really get to know you and know how you are as a person. So then how do you do that? You need to bridge that gap between you were just a salesperson trying to sell them a product that looks just like any other product they could buy on the market, and the shortest distance between you and that customer is your story. If you can share with that customer a story that gives them an insight on who you are as a person, sometimes in 3 minutes or 4 minutes, they will have a much better feeling of who you are than if you hadn't told them that. And now when they're comparing your product to someone else's, you are a person that is trying to help them with a solution. Everyone else is just a commodity. So no, obviously they still have to like you. You need to find something that resonates, but it's very different to be dealing with a human being that, you know, I told that version of my story that probably took 3 or 4 minutes, and you probably know me a lot more now than a lot of people know anyone that they buy stuff from, because who is this person? You don't know them, right? And you would ask those questions to yourself about any salesperson. Okay, oh, the product looks great, but who's the guy again? Or what's the company? And if you can't answer that in a satisfactory way, you're gonna be suspicious and you're gonna feel uncomfortable. So getting that story out turns you into a human being. And there is this, when it comes to sales as well, there's this super concise explanation of how to use stories, which is the basic sales story that everyone should be able to tell is, meet Bob. Bob is just like you. Bob had a problem and he felt bad. Now his problem is gone and he feels better. Don't you want to feel like Bob? And if you cannot articulate that with the case studies you share or the testimonials or however you present the product, then you're not using one of the most tried and tested techniques for convincing someone that what you're offering is going to do the job.
Right. I think that, you know, I haven't told Doug this, but I'm a big fan of comedy, you know, and so there's some comics that I love watching, and I think having a sense of humor in sales is critical, you know, because customers and clients, a lot of them want to live vicariously through you, you know, for whatever reason. They might think you have a more exciting life than they do, or that they can, if you're prepared to, and I think the great comics teach this, and the great comics are the ones that can laugh at themselves more than anything else. And so, and the audience identifies with the fact that he's making fun of his weight or his looks or his Indian parents or his heritage or the fact that he can't hear, right? You know, because the best comics and I think the best salespeople and the best storytellers are the ones that don't take themselves seriously at all, and get the audience or their client to actually focus on their weaknesses, in terms of like, focus on Simon's weaknesses, not mine, because I can take the pressure off me for a minute. And if he can laugh at himself or she can laugh at herself, then I think that's what's taught me a lot. And so I think great comics have got the ability to teach us a lot about everything. Because if you look at the best comedians, they're the ones that get up on stage and tell a story for 45 minutes. I mean, I'm a big fan of Billy Connolly, and, you know, he's sort of ending his career now, and people either love or hate him. But I went to see him in Australia, and I took my wife back then. And for 2 hours, I've never laughed like that. It's that stomach laugh, you know, where that you can't believe how hard you're laughing. And you leave the show and people say to me the next day, oh, did you like Billy Connolly? You know, oh, he was great. I loved it. What did he talk about? I don't fucking know. I can't remember a thing, right? But that's because that's what happens. You know, you just get lost in their story. And it's not that. I mean, everyone knows the Billy Connolly story about him being a welder and, you know, him growing up in Glasgow and, you know, being raised by two aunts and all that sort of stuff. He's got a very sad story if you actually look at it, but he's the one that pokes fun at himself the most. And I think that that's what, if you go back to all of our LinkedIn, let's call it the success or the failures, and people's success or failures on LinkedIn is, and I look at all the stuff that the posts, and I look at Doug's posts that have been, you know, let's call it successful. It's where we've been able to, you know, to make fun of ourselves, or we've, you know, we've fallen on our sword and we've admitted something. We've had everybody focus on their own weakness, and I think that that's where it's, you know, and you, I mean, you had a good post where you talked about, you know, you're not alone, you know, and so people identified. I certainly did, you know, that said, well, geez, Francisco's that's pretty brutally honest. You know, he's sharing something that's quite personal.
That was the post. That was the post about a work colleague of mine dreaming about punching a client in the face.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I think that that's, I mean, I think that that's what inspires me, you know, about getting better at selling or getting better at speaking. Is that I look at if we can, and I suppose I'm over the initial hump of worrying about what other people think too much.
Well,
you know,
vulnerability is a superpower, because what vulnerability does is it disarms people. If you can make fun of yourself, and if you do that before anyone else can, you don't leave them with anything. You know, a lot of people, whenever I talk about this, people remember the 8 Mile movie, where Eminem basically wins the last rap battle by making fun of himself throughout the whole thing and leaving the guy with nothing. But that's exactly it, because, you know, I had a keynote speech a few months ago it was online, but the most of the people were from Latin America, so they asked me to do it in Spanish, which is far from my strongest language. And I started by saying, okay, before anything else, I need to tell you why my Spanish is so crap. Because if I don't tell you that, you're going to spend the rest of this hour wondering what the hell is going on here. And then I made a joke about it, and I basically blamed it on the Catalans, who are not very friendly and whatever. But that was out of the way, and I don't think anybody really thought about, oh, this guy's Spanish is not very good, for the rest of that hour. And if I never said anything about it, I'm sure it would have taken, my credibility could have taken a knock, because I'm talking to business people, and, you know, I can't even speak their language perfectly. But get it out of the way, and it's out of the way. And I think it goes for anything else. I mean, if you're afraid of, if you're uncomfortable about something because you don't want people to notice it, or you don't want people to talk about it, own it and say something about it straight away, and then that's it. It's gone. To be fair, most people didn't care about it anyway, but now you won't care as well, because it's out of the way, it's been addressed, and you can move on. And otherwise, you're just always walking on eggshells about everything, not just on LinkedIn, but in life. You know, concerned that someone is going to notice something about you that you don't like.
So let me ask you your advice on something, Francisco, because we've got our brother Doug here. Okay. And so I think he has an amazing story, and the adversity he has overcome, you know, growing up and being deaf, and he might not want to focus on that. Do you think that his deafness should be a bigger part of his story?
I think it depends. I think it, yes, because that is a part of him. You shouldn't get rid of things that are a very intrinsic part of who you are, when those things are relevant.
Right.
I think I didn't know Doug was deaf until maybe 3 months ago.
Right.
I don't know if it was a post I read, or you put one of these videos out, and I thought, oh, right, he's deaf. I had no idea, and I
just thought he was from Chicago, and all people speak like that from Chicago.
I don't think it made any difference whatsoever to my interactions with him in writing, and to the work that he does as a copywriter. Right. I'm sure there's some stories of the difficulties he's overcome from his deafness that can make for very good copy, but as a copywriter, I don't find that particularly necessary to address.
Right.
If he's gonna speak, then he needs to address it. Like, you
Right.
don't want to have people wondering, is this guy deaf? Why does he speak like this? Like, you need to own that straight away to get it out of the way, and
Right.
then people are just like, okay, fine, he's deaf, he talks like that, no problem.
And I think I don't think he would ever want people to feel pity for him, right? Because he's not that sort of guy, right? And
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yep.
right. But I think that let's talk marketing from a marketing perspective. I think it's important, as you say, to deal with it, to prove that he has a limitation that doesn't stop him from doing anything. And so it goes back to that. But I think it's a big part of Doug's story that he should perhaps, take it out a little bit more in terms of he should take it out for a spin a little bit more. Not to say that he shouldn't use it as a clever marketing tool, but I think it is important, right? And I think it's because it's a part of him. Because see, what you and I don't realize, Francisco, is he can't hear anything that you and I are saying. He doesn't know what our voice sounds like. He doesn't know what our tone, our pitch, nothing. And he's reading everything on a translation tool, and I'm thinking, fuck, how hard would that be? Like that would drive me crazy, right? There you go. You know what I'm saying? It's like
I think it's first of all, I think it's worth mentioning to Doug that
let me see that. You've got your stupid the
virtual background is messing it up.
Your background is all screwing up the thing, you crazy fool.
I was just showing you the closed captioning. God damn.
We can't really see it. Yeah,
there you go.
So when you guys talk, that's the captioning on the bottom of the screen. That's captioning me right now. That's the only way I'm able to participate in the conversation. So you're right, Simon. I can't hear for shit.
I think
that would be good if you're married. Like that. Yeah. I would think that to be. That's why he's been married for so long, because he can't hear a thing.
I think it's worth mentioning to Doug that it is a shame that he can't hear me because I have a beautiful melodic voice.
No, he
doesn't.
He doesn't. He sounds he sounds like he's just put his parents through a wood chipper. No, he doesn't sound melodic at all.
Well, I think that there's always the risk of trying to use something like deafness and becoming gimmicky about it, right? Because, but having said that, Doug can't hear what people say, and a lot of people struggle to understand him when he communicates. I'm sure that I've just described most of his clients' marketing efforts. So he could just get copy of clients that he's working before they work with him and say, who's deaf now?
Yeah. I think it'd be perfect with clients, because you could just really take the complete piss out of clients. Because I'm sorry, I can't hear a thing. I have no idea what you said, right? I mean, I think it would be. I
want to say something real quick about me marketing. Well, not marketing. Me talking about my deafness. If it wasn't for me having to get on the phone to talk with people, I would never talk about it. Like Francisco said, it had nothing to do with my copywriting stuff. However, I have many clients that look at me on the phone, like right now. They're kind of like, and I know in their head, they're like, why is he talking like that? And I know they haven't read a post yet about me saying I'm deaf. They haven't read that far back. So once a month, I try to write a post about deafness, just so when we get on the phone call, it's not awkward. Because from the time you're growing up until now, when you order pizza, when you go to the restaurant, this is the look most people have when I start talking.
That's
like, okay, I just wish I could just eliminate that and we just get to the relationship. Yesterday, I have a client that I've been working with since August. And for whatever reason, Simon's experienced this with me. I can only talk to you on Google Meets, right? Because of the captioning. And for whatever reason, Google Meets wasn't working. And they stopped captioning. So I said, hey guys, we got to stop this. We got to get I don't understand what they're saying. And they're like, why don't you understand what we're saying? I'm like, don't you know? They're like, no. Don't you understand what we're saying? Hey, doc, call me. Give me a call on the phone. I'm like, I can't call you. And they're like, why can't you call me? You have a phone, don't you? I'm like, oh, dude, I'm that. They're like, you what? I'm that. Oh, I thought you just talked weird. And I'm like, oh my God. So we had a long conversation without captioning, explaining that I was that the whole time, since August. You know, it's not a new thing. I've been that since I was 18 months old. Like, holy shit, we honestly thought you spoke weird. Maybe you had some lisp or something. No, I can't understand you. And so anyway, that's the only reason why I talk about my deafness online. And it's not because I'm ashamed. I'm afraid to get too gimmicky, like Francisco said, because something about disability inspires inspiration porn. Like, oh my God, it's so inspiring. You got out of bed today. No, dude, after you, I get out of bed just like anybody else. You know, I don't wake up going, oh my God, I can't hear. Oh my God, what happened? It's very normal to me. And so I'm very, really about being inspirational pornography for some people. Some people beat up the inspiration porn. And I don't want to be the actor for that. But I get what both of you are saying, but I have to find a happy medium where it's a good story and it's also a warning. Don't you get on the call? This is how I sound. You know, so I have to find a balance between that.
Well, why don't you say in your post that you're the deaf copywriter? At least people would know, you know, in terms of, I'm not saying to draw attention to it, but you say, you know, because like Francisco, everyone finds out third hand or second hand that Doug's deaf. Okay. And because of, let's call it political correctness, we don't want to, like the lady, she just thought he was from Chicago or he was weird, right? And she didn't, but
she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong there.
Well, no, that's true. You know, and you know, like that, people look at him incredulously when he tells them, right? I mean, I have a lot of women look at me like that on our first date, and I don't have any, you know, I'm not deaf, so I wish I was. But see, I think it should be part of his personal branding. There's a guy that we deal with here in Colorado, and he works for a Mercedes dealership, and he's the bald guy. Like in this Mercedes dealership, there's like 40 salespeople, but on his email signature and in his business card, he's just the bald guy. And so everyone calls him back. No one even needs to know his number. They just say, hey, I want to call. Can you put me through to the bald guy? Well, the receptionists know. Oh yeah, that's Jeff. No worries.
Yeah.
See, he could be the bald and the deaf guy. I mean, he'd be like, could be a superstar.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that when you decide what you know, who you're going to be online, or you know, what your brand is going to be, you are trying to be niche enough that the right people get attracted to you straight away by seeing your content. And having followed Doug's stuff for a bit over a year, I think there's plenty of different aspects of what he does that are attractive in their own right, and will attract a certain type of people in their own right. None of them have to do with deafness, to me. So there's a specific type of personality to it. You know, there's a lot of the music references, or the type of some no nonsense attitude to stuff. To me, those are a stronger brand than the deaf stuff. I mean, there's plenty of stories of being deaf that can come into it in his content, but he's not trying to attract deaf people. He's not trying to attract disability, whatever. So I don't think that's the. If he had to choose one of the things that make him who he is, I think there's more mileage out of his personality than necessarily of the fact that he's deaf. Yeah, it needs to be very clear on your about section. If it's not now, it should be. And by the way, I'm deaf, which means, you know, I'm not going to be bothering you with an hour-long Zoom calls, because it gets very tiring to read the bloody captions while we're talking on Zoom.
But Doug, do you have that on your profile? By the way, I'm deaf.
Um, I've never tried. I've never thought about putting
No,
that
but
in.
you
I
obviously don't.
want to feel what Francisco just said. We're not going to be bothered with 1 hour phone call because I have to read the bloody caption for an hour.
No.
So it's going to be a quick meeting.
Yeah, so
I'm feeling that.
yeah, I think it's you have you have to remember that any story you're telling is not about, as I said before, it's not about the outside story, the external circumstances. It's about the internal journey. Now, when he talks about being deaf, he could be talking about being American, he could be talking about being bald, he could be talking about many different things. It's about what is the lesson you're trying to get out of it, what is the feeling that you're trying to generate in people. And if you all you talk about is overcoming difficulty, then the deafness might be a much bigger part of what you put out there. If it's nothing to do with that, then yeah, there's some analogies you can make with
Right.
marketing and copywriting, but other than that, I think you would struggle to keep getting lessons out of this thing. And if it becomes your signature, I mean, it would be a strange signature story to have as a copywriter that you're deaf, if there's nothing to do with overcoming. I mean, you could do something with languages and how you had to learn, to speak in very different ways, but that could come across a bit gimmicky, and I don't think it necessarily needs that. So I think it's at the end of the day what people want the world to think about when they think about them. And if death is not the thing he wants people to think about when they think about him, I wouldn't lead with that. Like Brazilian is not what I want people to think about. I don't care, but Brazilian is not it, right? Or traveled around the world and lived in many places. I don't care. That's not part of what makes me me. Like I want people to think I'm fun, so the humor is always going to come across very quickly if you watch any of my stuff, because I want it out there. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I like having, but like how much I'm interested in meditation or philosophy, it's not at all part of
Right.
of who I want to come across as. So it's in the background. It inform other stuff, but it's not right up
I,
there.
I, I just think it should be a part of his story. It shouldn't be the story, because I think it provides that perspective. And like I remember when our team met Doug for the first time, we were on Zoom calls, and I said, "Oh, you need to understand that Doug is deaf, and so we're, he's getting a translate thing." And they said, "Well, Simon, you're Australian. It's taken us 5 years to understand what you say, so I'm sure we can understand what Doug says, right?" So, but yeah, I just think and I'm not trying to tell him what to do, but I think it's just to me, it's an interesting part of his story. It's what makes Doug Doug. It's not something that, like you, I don't think people hire him or anybody with a disability, let's call it that, out of pity. They hire him because, like, if he wasn't competent, I would have just said, "Doug, you're not competent. I don't care if you're whatever affliction you have. That's got nothing to do with it. The business is business, and so we hire the best people we can, and he is at the top of his game, and so that's why he gets the job, right?"
Yeah, one of the best books I've read, period, is called Far from the Tree. I think the writer's name is Andrew Solomon. And what he does is he tells the stories of children that are, quote unquote, not normal. So, there's a chapter on gay children, there's a chapter on deaf children, there's a chapter on Down syndrome children, there's a chapter where he interviews the mother of the Columbine kid, or one of the Columbine kids. And one of the strongest senses I got from most of those stories, and definitely from the story of the deaf people, is they don't, in general, don't see themselves as disabled. And the worst thing that can ever be done to them is consider them disabled, because the parents that say you have a problem, we should try and fix it, end up doing the children a disservice, because instead of learning sign language and getting into a community that is very rich and treats them normally, they keep trying to treat them as if they're less and they need to overcome something. So I think that when I think about the stories that you tell on a regular basis, particularly the story that you lead with, that story is going to say a lot about you. And for most people, they still associate things like deafness with disability. So if you don't want that to be what people are thinking about you from the go, then that's not a story I would lead with. You can still have it. It's part of your life. It will be part of your arsenal of stories. And I'm sure learning how to deal with all these different types of communication, sign language, and people that don't get that you can't necessarily read lips the way people do it in the movies, or now with the whole transcription software, there's a lot of similarities to good copywriting and what a good copywriter does, and you can use that. But I think that if someone makes themselves the deaf copywriter, that might be leading them down a path that's not where they want to go. And again, perhaps because I didn't know that about Doug until a year into it, to me was just an interesting trivia. I was like, oh, he's deaf. Okay, he sounds funny if he talks on Zoom or whatever. That's fine. But it didn't alter a great deal my perception about who he was. But I think if I'd known that from the beginning, like I used to think of Doug as the guy who power lifts and writes good copy, and I had to add deaf to that much later. So I think it's just how you want people to perceive you and where you find most power in your personal story. And that could be it. But
see, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, Doug. Do you power lift, like as in power lift weights?
Yep.
You
That's
still
where
do it?
the shoulders come from.
Is that
really? I didn't say he was good at it. Just that he does it.
I just thought because he told me he eats a lot of hamburgers, so I thought he was just like a big chunky Chicagoan that eats a lot of Chicago pizza and hamburgers, right?
I've been powerlifting for such a long time. I'm really bad at it, but it's part of. I consider myself more of a power lifter than I am a deaf person because that's just what I do more than the other. It's an interesting story with Francisco. When we first met, he showed me his kettlebell. Do you remember that? You were showing me your gorilla kettlebell. That's where I led the conversation.
The gorilla. I think we were in lockdown, I think, or I was in lockdown, and we were talking about working. For some reason, we started talking about working out, and then I showed you a picture of this 32-kilo gorilla kettlebell that I have in my terrace, and I said, as long as I've got this, I'm covered.
Yep. I've never forgotten that. That was a year ago. That was almost a year ago. I've never forgotten that. Anyway, we've got to wrap this up. I want to give Francisco an opportunity to promote his book. Tell me about your book and where can we find it? What's the title of it? What is it about?
Sure. So my book is called Bear, A Guide to Brutally Honest Public Speaking. It can be found wherever Amazon books are found. And in theory, it's a book about public speaking, how to become a better speaker. If I've done my job and people can read past the jokes, then it will also be a book about how to write better, how to tell better stories, and how to use vulnerability as a superpower, as I described earlier. Because my whole approach to public speaking and life is find the most embarrassing things I can find in my life, or the most difficult things I can find in my life, look for the funny side of them, and then use them to communicate a message that can be relevant to other people. So 100% the book will teach you how to be a better public speaker. And nowadays with Zoom, almost all of us are public speakers more than we used to be before. But it will help you become a better writer. And it sounds pretentious as hell, but if it does for you what it did for me, it might make you a tiny happier about all the stuff that at the moment you think of as weaknesses, which actually are strengths waiting to be used properly.
Very good. Well, I'll go online and buy it and charge it to Doug. I'm going to look forward to that, Francisco.
By the way, I highly recommend the book. I've recommended it to many people. So if you're listening to this podcast, grab a copy. Grab a copy.
And
Hey, thanks, Francisco, for talking to us.
You're welcome, Simon. You too, Doug.
Take it easy, guys. Thank you so much, Francisco.